Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. It's good to have you here for this webinar that we have recorded in advance as a treat for you all. So I'm Becky, I'm the Chief Exec of the English Association, and it's just such a pleasure to be here for this session where I have the honour and privilege of speaking to Ros Moriarty, who's a children's author of 9 wonderful books and other things besides. But today we will be focusing on children's literature. I'm just going to do a quick word about the English Association. So, we are a learned society and subject association which was founded in 1906 to promote, support, and celebrate the discipline of English studies. We cover all stages of education from primary and early years through secondary and further, and up to higher education and beyond. And we cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature, and creative writing. Now, events like this one are made possible by the fantastic contribution of our volunteer speakers. So thank you so much to you, Ros, for being available to speak with me across the divide of our time zones. It's much appreciated. But thanks also to our members who, of course, pay their membership fees and help us to keep events like this free and open to all. So if any of you here watching this session today would like to contribute to the national conversation about English, please do consider joining us. Membership starts at just £29, and that enables you to support our events and campaigning work for a whole year, and you get access to a whole range of member benefits, including access to all of our journals. Okay, right, that's the spiel over and done with. So now I have the absolute delight of being here with Ros. Ros, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly and tell us who you are?
Thanks, Becky. It's so lovely to speak with you, as you say, across the time zone. So it's evening for me, morning for you. Yeah, I'm Ros Moriarty, and I have the great pleasure, besides other things, including working in design, I write for children, and I write about the natural world for children. And I love speaking about my books and love it even more when my little readers enjoy them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, today we're going to be starting off by looking at Beach Song, which is one of Roz's books that we've just reviewed on the Primary Plus Reviews page on the English Association website, which was a real treat to read. And so I'm delighted to be able to share it with you all. And along with this recording, you will also get some teacher tips from Roz to help you in using this book in your classroom. So I am so looking forward to this. Roz, if I could hand over you to just start with a little reading from Beach Song.
I will. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
So it's Beach Song, and as you'll see, it's written by myself and illustrated by Samantha Campbell. And Samantha is a First Nations artist based in Alice Springs, a long way from the beach. So it was wonderful to work with her on this book. But yeah, it'd be lovely to start with it with a reading. So this is the start of the book, and it says, "When I duck and dive through the towering waves, I see what the dolphin sees. Seaweed that sways in the rush and ebb of the ocean's salty swell. I leap like the dolphin leaps. When I ride the thunder of a foamy crest, I see what the seal sees, the lunge of the sea and torrent of froth that spins its swirls of white in the blue. I surf like the seal surfs." And maybe one more spread. "When I stare out to sea at the waves washing in, I see what the whale sees. Wind-whipped troughs of the running tide that licks and laps the rocky reef. I blow like the whale blows." So it probably gives you an idea of the book, and it's quite tactile language about a day at the beach.
I feel like I can smell it. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, so tell us a bit about where the idea for the book came from and what drew you to writing about this particular place for this book.
So the reason probably I write about the natural world is that for many children, an inland life or an urban city life means that they don't get to spend idle hours at the beach that perhaps I did as a child. And that the natural world we know from science is calming, it is restorative, it creates creativity. So there are all sorts of benefits for intersecting with the natural world. So, in a way, the book is about encouraging families and kids to connect with the natural world, but also maybe if children are not connecting with the natural world, the science tells us that if you actually look at waves through a window, it still actually gives you the scientific benefit. So, my sense was in writing about the natural world that these benefits that children can glean from the pages of a book go beyond the words. And why the beach? I love the beach. So I grew up as a kid in Tasmania, the southernmost island of Australia, and always at the beach. So we lived on the northwest coast. It was wild and woolly and cold and wind whipped. Sometimes summer, my mother used to say that summer was on a Tuesday last year. So it was, it was a pretty, I guess, elemental childhood. And I think it set me up for life for not just an appreciation of the bush and nature, but a real way of drawing close to it emotionally and physically and creatively. So I spent about 6 weeks on the coast north of Sydney, where I live, about 3 or 4 years ago. And for 6 weeks, I think it was just the end of COVID, or maybe nearly the end of COVID. So it was a little bit solitary. And I was doing all the things that the child in this book does. So I was walking in the rain and the wind and the sun. I was diving in and out of those waves. I was watching sea life. I was looking at tiny shells in rock pools. So for 6 weeks, I was really doing these things, and then just sat down to write this book over the next few weeks. And it came together as a way of celebrating a solitary experience at the beach, which is different, I guess, for a children's book. But it's a safe environment on the pages, but it's also an adventure to consider a child at the beach all day.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you can, in that just little reading that you gave, even in the sort of the rhythm of the words, you can hear the kind of crashing of the waves and that kind of, the movement of a beach with the tide and the waves. Yeah, you could feel that coming through. So there are nine children books that you've written, and
Mm.
does the inspiration for those all come from that same place, do you think, from that place of your memories of your childhood, or are there different sources of inspiration that you draw on?
So this book, as I mentioned, is illustrated by a First Nations illustrator. My other books are illustrated by our design studio, Balarinji, but they are also stories of the bush. So they're not stories of the seaside. So during my adult life, I've been running Balarinji, which is an Indigenous design studio that my partner John Moriarty and I set up his Yanyuwa 43 years ago, actually. So we've lived that life of taking our own children up through the bush, up to the Gulf, 5 day drive up the centre of Australia, and always immersed in the bush. So it can be the wild bush, it can be snakes and crocodiles and wild turtles and laying on the islands and with turtle eggs. And so I incorporate all of those experiences too that we've shared with our children and we've shared with lots of people in the community. And so, writing those books as well. So all about the natural world, but often about the wild world. And sometimes for the really littlies, I wrote a book called 10 Scared Fish, which is it's a counting book actually. And by the time we get to nine scared, nine fish in the salt water and a shark with an open mouth, it's about 10 scared fish and one big mouth. So sometimes there's a punchline. And on the next page, we see all 10 fish have scurried away out of the river mouth. So a little bit of jeopardy. So I suppose what I'm trying to do in these children's books is to really, and you mentioned the language in Beach Song, and Beach Song is a song. It's based around verses and stanzas and repetitive choruses and onomatopoeia and similes. And I like to incorporate literary devices into books for our earliest readers. Even a few words, and I'm a linguist by study, so even a few words, I think, can do their job in simplicity, but also in this richness of the English language is of really great interest to me.
Yeah, thank you. Isn't it amazing actually how some of our youngest readers can have their ears and minds most open to to the magic of those devices and to the intricacies of language? Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you so much. Um, Yes, we've heard how nature, in all its sort of different forms, is at the heart of a lot of your inspiration. And we've talked a little bit about the sort of the scientific benefits of children interacting with nature. But how do you think early exposure to nature first literature, so nature in books, changes the way that a child interacts with the environment in real life?
I think it's educational without being didactic. So to me, a children's book needs to be fun. We have a almost 7-month-old grandson who has been loving reading these early reading loosely, but loving being exposed to bright colours and interesting images and repetitive language, I think, and that reassurance of rhyme and repetition, all those devices, I think, are human storytelling. So it makes enormous sense that our earliest readers, our youngest children, will feel a sense of place within that. And then over time, what they're learning from the pages, what they're absorbing, probably more than actively learning, stays with them. So a day at the beach, hopefully one of my readers is going to be on the lookout for dolphins that are surfing in the waves, or going to see little periwinkles in a different way who are gouging their paths through rock pools. So I think it's a symbiotic process of experiencing nature, seeing it on the page, feeling familiar, feeling a caring perhaps for nature and for the environment. I think it's all connected from our earliest experiences.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it seems as well that maybe there's something about sort of the slowing down and noticing. Because if you're slowing down and noticing the sort of magic of these literary devices, and you're slowing down and you're thinking about the sounds of the beach and the waves and the creatures, then one hopes that translates into how you move through the world for real life, that yes, you're looking at your toes in the sand and looking for the crabs and all those sorts of things. Yeah, that connectedness.
I think children do that naturally.
Mm.
And perhaps it's us as adults who are, it's time to go home. It's time to leave the beach. Let's move on. Let's have a quick swim. Whereas the child on the pages of Beach Song has a whole day, and you can see the day unfold until the safety of being home at night. But during that day, that act of being still, being present, I wrote it very much with a variety of emotions in mind. So wonder, joy, um, the sense of happiness from seeing what you're seeing, but also a little bit of contemplation. So the periwinkle grips the rock in the rock pool. The child grips their knees. So feeling sure, being secure, questioning those things. But again, not in a didactic way, but just introducing how that might be and how that might feel. But the rhythm, I think all of those devices, the rhythm, the repetition, the sometimes the softness of the words, sometimes the crisp consonants, they're all really pacing this book. They're pacing the child's experience of the book. And if we let very small children, they're not going to race through a day at the bush or the beach.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I sort of want to come back to this idea of you said you really enjoy playing with literary devices. And I wonder if you've got a kind of favorite phrase or technique that you've used in Beach Song that you feel is one of those kind of real moments of connectedness where the child reader, connects with
Mm,
that environment particularly.
yeah. So I think the final pages of Beach Song is where, we get to the end of the book and the end of the big day at the beach, a very tiring day at the beach. And I think the device where, again, it's alliteration, it's onomatopoeia, it's repetitive, but it's when I lie on the sand under the indigo sky, I see what the owl sees, a filament net of faraway stars that blink and wink as the universe sighs. I hoot like the owl hoots. So I feel that the pace can actually create what you're describing, and the way, not just the way the words are put together, but the way that they resonate in the way they're read. And I'm hoping also that, parents will enjoy reading Beach Song because it is reminiscent of being at the beach, but it's a good night book as well. It slows its pace from the pounding of the surf and the surfing with the dolphins to looking at the creatures who live further up the beach and racing along the sand, pretending to be a seagull. But right at the very end, it's about going to sleep. And in fact, the final illustration questions, was it a dream or was I really at the beach?
Yeah, it struck me as you were reading that final page, I could feel my own breathing, like, you kind of, and if you're a teacher reading the book or the parent or carer reading the book, I think that's one of the fundamental joys of a really good children's book is that you, the adult, the reader, also get to partake in the experience. And you've talked a bit about sort of emotional range and the kind of feelings that you want to kind of stir up in the child reader. But when you're writing, are you also conscious of the feelings that you might evoke in the teacher reader or parent reader?
100% Becky, because I'm evoking my own feelings.
Mm.
So, I think any of the adages about writing, and I do write for adults as well, but anything, write what you know. And if I haven't experienced these emotions or I don't know what these emotions feel like, then I don't know how to write them. So if I experience them as an adult and if I'm communicating them effectively to a teacher, a carer, or a parent, or an older sibling who might read this to a child, or a child reading aloud, all those things to me go together and they all have to work. So for this book to be resonant in the way that you hope so and hope the subject matter deserves, really, this is our ocean, this is our planet. These are big themes around experiencing the wonder of a beach. So I am appealing to everyone who has this experience, or for someone it's the first time experience in a small child.
Yeah, thank you. It does make Beach Song, I think, it seems like one of those books that you could use at many different moments of the day in a classroom. In a moment when you're thinking about tides and oceans or sea creatures, or when you're trying to have a moment, it fulfills lots of different functions because it is so complex. Yeah, that's really interesting. So I'm trying to get distracted by thinking about it too much. Yeah, we just talked a bit about Beach Song having that kind of lyrical, sort of meditative quality. Is it a challenge to balance that sense of giving us a sense of calm with a kind of ba, 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 like more playful, kind of upbeat energy that you might get in some other children's books?
I think it's definitely a consideration, and depending on the era of children's writing, I think the market does determine, what is popular in terms of now with reduced attention spans and, such digital content and screen time. I suspect that beach song is quite a languid experience. So it's not that some of it doesn't move quickly, the surfing does, the racing along the sand with the seagull, but the fact that it is rhythmic, it's a song that is on repeat, it has a chorus, the structure does slow it down. So, definitely it is a lyrical language book in a different way than something that, as you say, is pow pow pow, moving along quickly. It's not really that sort of book, but it does have its high moments and then countered with its quieter, lower moments because every book I think has to achieve that arc of emotion.
And was that a conscious choice of yours to kind of almost push back against what children's day-to-day experience, I think, I mean, I have a 4-year-old, so, it tends to be like, which is very high octane, um,
Mm,
no sort of pause moments. It's sort of very, lots of colours, lots of sounds. Did you
mm,
choose to kind of pitch Beach Song against that consciously?
mm. I'm not sure I did. I
Mm.
think I wanted to find a way to express emotion. So, how even small children now, 2 or 3-year-old children can see a smiling emoji and say happy and a sad emoji and say sad. I think that's new. That wasn't happening really when perhaps our kids were small. I think the idea about expressing emotions and being encouraged to experience those emotions was something that drove me around how to express the beach experience in that emotional way was driving me more than running counter to what was potentially out there. So I think it's part of the tapestry, it's part of the mosaic of a children's bookcase, if you like. And, certainly the higher energy books are so needed. And I think it's part of the puzzle, I think, but it is a little different. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, if we just talk a little bit about your earlier books as well, which were created in collaboration with your design studio,
Yes.
and you did some translations into an Aboriginal language. Yanyuwa,
Yeah.
is that, have I?
Yanyuwa, that's right. So John, my partner's language and family language. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Right, okay. And so, ooh, so many questions to ask you, but I'll start with the ones we've decided we will talk about.
Mm.
What inspired you to write those stories, first of all? I know we've talked quite a lot about sort of the natural world and being at the heart of your inspiration, but talk to me a bit about, yeah, how another language and another culture comes into play in your inspiration.
Yeah, so I mentioned I grew up in Tasmania, in lots to do with the natural world. So I was always very connected to the mountains and creeks and rivers and coasts. So the idea of being in nature was very familiar to me. But I moved to Canberra to study when I was 17, and then I moved to the Department of Aboriginal Affairs to work when I was about 21, which is where I met John, my future partner. And when we had children, we started taking them up and down to his community in Borroloola in the Gulf of Carpentaria, so the 5-day drive that we would take our kids to. And we would teach them, John would teach them, he would show them tracks in the sand and talk about the life cycle of animal and birds and insects and point out everything to them. And as parents, we always wanted to ensure they had that connection. And so I think I fell into children's writing by accident. I had written a memoir for adults about the bush and about a trip to the Tanami Desert, and I published that in 2010. And then 2012, I just started to pen these little stories. They're not Indigenous stories, they're my stories about the natural world, but they are also influenced by the connection to country, so connection to land that we were creating and experiencing with our family for our children and with the local community. So I'm not even sure how I sat down to write the first couple, Kangaroos Hop and 10 Scared Fish. And then they did well, and I really loved writing them. But our design studio was very logical to illustrate these stories from deep in the Australian bush. And so that's what we did. We had images in our archive, in our design archive, to draw from, and many of them animal images and in glorious colours, really, for really young children. So I found my niche in sort of 3-year-olds ish for those small books, and ended up in the end writing 8 of those.
And did those eight then come quite quickly once you found that niche?
They did actually. So I published, I think, probably 2 or 4 in 2012, and then another 4 in 2015. So it was pretty quick, and they're all still going well. And some of them have been published as baby board books now. And governments, for instance, procure them for school programs and for baby packs, for new parents in Australia. So they're telling a very Australian story with these beautiful language translations as well. We worked with a linguist. John Bradley is a linguist who was with Monash University. He lived in the community and worked with language holders for a long time, several decades ago, actually. And then he and the community helped us with those translations. And we also have an early years program called Indikindi, where we deliver early years learning for babies to 5-year-olds in remote communities to try to change up the school readiness for our littlies in those communities. And so these books became part of that education program, and the translations make it very local for those kids.
How wonderful. And if you have a class full of children who are reading in English rather than Yanyuwa, can they
Mm.
can you read them sort of side by side and have conversations about the language? Would that be something that would be interesting? Well, it would be interesting, but would it be straightforward enough to do you think, in a classroom setting?
I think the language is difficult for the fact that it's not a mainstream language like French or German or Spanish or an Asian language that schools teach. So it's part of the experience and it's part of the way of seeing those words on the page. But not many Australians can speak or pronounce Aboriginal languages. So it's an introduction, if you like. And it's a yeah, very beautiful way to look at a very different language with very different characteristics and ways of viewing the world.
Yeah, how brilliant. I think it must be yeah, quite powerful. Thinking of windows, mirrors, and doors, for children in those communities to be able to hear themselves, their own voices in books where I presume, most often will encounter English in
Exactly.
the classroom.
Yeah, exactly. And our Indie Kindy program is based in an Aboriginal worldview and incorporating Aboriginal language and stories from elders. And in Borroloola, it's along a concept of Aninkarnjara Kia Waru, which you can probably hear is such a different sounding language, which means being still on country. And when I'm still on country, I have clarity to see where to go. So all based around that concept. And again, it's meditative, it's contemplative, it's a spiritual base of living life in a different way, close to country.
Hmm. And when you were writing these other 8 books, you've mentioned you're a linguist by training and you have another linguist who
Mm.
you work with. Do you also have a
Mm.
team of people around you so that you can kind of, yeah, make sure that the books are kind of rooted back in to the culture?
So the books get test driven in Indie
Oh.
Kindy, and we like to see how the kids interact with the story and that it is resonant of what they're experiencing. But these are stories that any kid can really relate to. So the idea of 10 scared fish is about who the fish might encounter in the salt water, the fresh water, and then the shark at the end. Or kangaroos hop is kangaroos hop, birds fly. Kangaroos hop, birds fly, echidnas shuffle. So they're not dreaming stories because I'm not an Indigenous author. So I don't write stories that have deeper country significance because that's not my place to do that. But they are stories that are universally accessible for any child in their natural environment. But the illustrations from Balarinji and the translations give them another dimension for the children in our program and for other Australian children to see Aboriginal language and to experience something that isn't just English in this country.
Yeah, for sure. And how wonderful for children, in a classroom in the UK, where there will often be lots and lots of different languages, but probably not Yanyuwa.
Yeah,
So yeah, how wonderful to bring another language into that tapestry. Yeah.
yeah, and you can also probably see that the translations are really quite clear around the translation and the English line. So it's a lovely way to follow through a language without just having a block of text and then trying to work out how it relates to the story, because the translation is a worldview translation, so it doesn't necessarily just reflect the words. The kangaroos hop, Wanla Walla Manthra, um, is not necessarily just the kangaroos hop. So it may say something about, the country the kangaroo's on, or there'll be other ways to say that, but it's quite clear, what relates to what, which makes it much easier for the reader to have a try at pronouncing it too. It's
Wonderful.
quite phonetic, quite phonetic.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Okay. Thank you ever so much. Um, well, I guess, do you know what's next? What are you looking to write for the young ones next? And where will you look for your next kind of surge of inspiration?
Yes, well, it's interesting because I'm on the coast again. I've written some little books about insects, about their unique properties, but again, not didactic, it's a story. I've written one about lizards and how different many lizards are and the beauty in diversity and difference. I've written another book about a mother whale and her baby, and it's it's really about the oceans and ecology, but again, in a different frame. So I don't know. I can't stop writing about the natural world, Becky. And yeah, whenever I sit down to work on a writing project, I seem to gravitate back to my under fives or sixes.
That's wonderful. I particularly what I find really appealing is the way you've kind of blended fiction and non-fiction, the kind of like lyrical non-fiction, so that exactly as you say, I'm just sort of parroting back to what we've already said, it's learning but without being didactic, that you're immersed in this environment through the power and the beauty of the language, but it's based on fact about our natural world.
Yes, yes, yes. I love doing that.
And where can we find your books? Here in the UK, where can we get hold of them and have them in our classrooms?
That would be wonderful. My publisher is Allen and Unwin, so just go to allenandunwin.com.au. Definitely, there are distributors in the UK, but Allen and Unwin, my publisher, would certainly be helpful there, and also with the teaching notes that you've described.
Yes, thank you. Is there anything you'd like to add about the teacher notes before we finish?
No, look, I think they've been developed obviously by teachers and by education specialists, and I get some really beautiful little videos back of, what kids have done. They've dressed up, they've acted the books out, they've created sometimes their own books, and I get pictures of them having a different punchline or a slightly different trajectory in the story. So I love that. I love actually receiving back how kids have enjoyed working with my books. And obviously, it's a delight for me to get photos of little ones enjoying these pages because, as you say, I think this is a conduit to the natural world. It is a conduit to a contemplative world in a place that is very busy for kids now. So it's a very different experience from screen time, but I hope it is exciting in its own way. And yeah, so look, if anyone in the UK wants to send me pictures and videos and little pieces of books, we'd love to post what's going on.
That's wonderful. I'm sure we'll take you up on the invitation. Thank you ever so much, Ros. It's been an absolute delight to speak to you. I will stop the recording now. I hope
Thanks,
those of you
Becky.
who are with us have enjoyed it, and yeah, do pick up the teacher notes and have beach song in a classroom near you. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much, Becky.